Hey everybody! Today we're going to be reading chapter 14 of Judges, and after I get done reading scripture, I'm going to explain what I think about it, how I feel about it. And I'm not an expert in scripture at all, so please do not lean on my understanding, but trust in the Lord for understanding and for guidance. And if I mispronounce any names, places, people, words, anything like that, I do apologize. And I am reading from my Bible. It's the New Living Translation for those who want to follow along. And without further ado, let's get started. One day when Samson was in Timnah, one of the Philistine women caught his eye. When he returned home, he told his father and mother, "A young Philistine woman in Timnah caught my eye. I want to marry her. Get her for me." His father and mother objected. "Isn't there even one woman in our tribe or among all the Israelites you could marry?" they asked. "Why must you go to the pagan Philistines to find a wife?" But Samson told his father, "Get her for me. She looks good to me." His father and mother didn't realize the Lord was at work in this, creating an opportunity to work against the Philistines who ruled over Israel at the time. As Samson and his parents were going down to Timnah, a young lion suddenly attacked Samson near the vineyards of Timnah. At that moment, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, and he ripped the lion's jaw apart with his bare hands. He did it as easily as if it were a young goat, but he didn't tell his father or mother about it. When Samson arrived in Timnah, he talked with the woman and was very pleased with her. Later, when he returned to Timnah for the wedding, he turned off the path to look at the carcass of the lion, and he found that a swarm of bees had made some honey in the carcass. He scooped some of the honey into his hands and ate it along the way. He also gave some to his father and mother, and they ate it. But he didn't tell them he had taken the honey from the carcass of the lion. As his father was making final arrangements for the marriage, Samson threw a party at Timnah, and as was the custom for elite young men. When the bride's parents saw him, they selected 30 young men from the town to be his companions. Samson said to them, "Let me tell you a riddle. If you solve my riddle during these 7 days of the celebration, I will give you 30 fine linen robes and 30 sets of festival clothing. But if you can't solve it, then you must give me 30 fine linen robes and 30 sets of festival clothing." "All right," they agreed. "Let's hear your riddle." So he said, "Out of the one who eats comes something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet." 3 days later, they were still trying to figure it out. On the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, "Entice your husband to explain the riddle for us, or we will burn down your father's house with you in it. Did you invite us to this party just to make us poor?" So Samson's wife came to him in tears and said, "You don't love me. You hate me. You have given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." "I haven't even given the answer to my father or mother," he replied. "Why should I tell you?" So she cried whenever she was with him and kept it up for the rest of the celebration. At last, on the 7th day, he told her the answer because she was tormenting him with her nagging. Then she explained the riddle to the young men. So before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the town came to Samson with their answer. "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" Samson replied, If you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved my riddle." Then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. He went down to the town of Ashkelon killed 30 men, took their belongings, and gave their clothing to the men who had solved his riddle. But Samson was furious about what had happened, and he went back home to live with his father and mother. So his wife was given in marriage to the man who had been Samson's best man at the wedding. Thus ends the reading of chapter 14 of Judges. So, a lot of stuff just happened. We're going to go ahead and go back to the beginning and go through it, because a lot of stuff just happened. So first of all, Samson wanted to marry a Philistine woman, and Samson is an Israelite, and so is his parents. So the Israelites were not supposed to marry outside of their people, because they were not supposed to marry people from other nations, because if an Israelite man was to marry a foreign, a pagan woman, then that woman would influence that man, the Israelite man, in order to worship other gods other than the God of Israel, and other than the Lord. So it was always best for Israelite men to marry fellow Israelite women, and Israelite women to marry fellow Israelite men, so that way they can build each other up in the ways of the Lord. You would be marrying someone of your own faith, who believes in the same thing that you do. You won't be influenced by any, pagan stuff, because you would be marrying your own faith. It's also, the whole equally yoked thing. You're supposed to marry someone with the same beliefs, values, stuff like that as you. And, when they have children, they'll be able to raise them up in the ways of the Lord and stuff like that, and not have to deal with no pagan stuff. No idolatry, no sinful stuff. So, that's the reason why Samson's parents wanted Samson, to marry a fellow Israelite woman. But Samson just wanted to marry that Philistine woman simply because she looked good to him. That is a problem, because, whenever sin comes in, it always starts with the eyes. It starts with your eyes. You see something, it catches your attention, then you start to think about it. So then it captures your mind and stuff. You start to think on it, then you end up committing the acts, with your physical body. So, like, in terms of, like, sexual immorality and everything, let's say a man looks at a woman, as soon as you look at that woman lustfully, you have already committed adultery with her. You've already sinned. You looked with your eyes, you saw, that this woman looked good to you and everything. You started thinking, with your mind, lustful thoughts and everything about the woman, and then eventually you'll end up committing the act, So the fact that this pagan woman looked good to Samson is already a problem, But anyway, luckily, though, in verse 4, it says that his father and mother didn't realize the Lord was at work in this, creating an opportunity to work against the Philistines who ruled over Israel at the time. So, even though this woman looks good to Samson and stuff like that, and this Philistine woman is going to cause problems, obviously, because she a pagan woman and she not an Israelite. This was all a part of the Lord's plan to deal with the Philistines. So, therefore, it's okay. It's all right. It reminds me of the man whom the Lord told to marry a prostitute. You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure when we're going to get to that, if we've already read that or not. But, we'll get to that when we get to that. But anyway, this lion and everything that Samson, killed and stuff, that tried to attack him. Samson killed the lion with his bare hands. That's amazing. That is amazing. And the lion ended up, the carcass of the lion ended up having, a beehive in there, bees making honey and stuff. So, the bees made the carcass of the lion a new home. So Samson got him some honey on the way to his wedding or whatever, like that's just an amazing part of the story right there. We just killing lions with bare hands and eating honey and stuff. Like, it's crazy, but okay. So yeah, the first 11 verses of chapter 14 was already a lot. It was already a lot. But it is amazing how first of all, I love the fact that Samson's parents, were trying to, obey the laws of the Lord and stuff like that, and have Samson marry within, the Israelites, marry an Israelite woman. So kudos to them for that. But Samson was obeying the Lord, was following the Lord's plan by marrying this pagan woman. So, what can you do? Sometimes the Lord calls us to do things that don't make sense to us. Like Samson's parents thought that that Samson was being disobedient to the Lord by marrying this pagan woman, this Philistine woman. But in actuality, he was actually obeying the Lord, because this was all a part of the Lord's plan. It's like we don't know sometimes the reasons why the Lord does what he does. We just got to follow his plan. It's just like when you read the Bible, like, you might not understand everything that the Lord is saying. You might feel like the Lord is contradicting himself or whatever, but you just have to obey. Like, you have to obey the Lord. You have to trust in his plan. You have to trust in his character, and know that he's a righteous God. He's a holy God. He's good. Everything he does is good. You might not understand, why he allows certain things to happen or why he does certain things, but just know that he is good. So the only one that does evil over here is Satan, you know what I'm saying? So the Lord doesn't do anything evil, and he does not contradict himself, and he does not break his commandments and everything. Everything the Lord does is just, and righteous and right and good and pleasing and perfect. Like, anyway, let's move on to the next part, because we got a little bit more to cover. So then Samson at this party, at this wedding celebration, at this party and stuff like that, he want to tell a riddle. And the riddle basically has to deal with the lion and the honey and stuff like that and everything. It has to deal with that. I don't know why he made this bet, with these people. And then they want to go to Samson's wife and everything and be all upset with her and everything because they cannot solve the riddle. You're the one that got yourself into this bet. And because you're about to lose the bet and gonna have to owe all of this stuff and everything to Samson, now you want to get all upset and go threaten his wife. That's not right. Then, of course, the wife, fearing for her life, for the life of her father, fearing for her father's house and fearing for her life and stuff like that, goes to Samson and stuff in tears, trying to understand the riddle so that way she could tell them the answer, so that way she could, save her life. So the fact that, so it's like it was a betrayal, to Samson, that his wife would, that his wife would go and, tell the answer of the riddle and everything to these people and everything, because if they win the bet, then Samson's gonna have to give, gonna have to pay, what he owes them, So it was a messed up situation for the woman to be in the first place. I do feel bad for her, when it comes down to that. But like it is what it is. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that women get involved, in stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I feel like the bet overall was stupid. Like, okay. Solving riddles is not bad, but it's like it's the price that was paid, that has to be paid. Like 30 fine linen robes and 30 sets of festival clothing. I would not have used that as the reward for winning the bet if I did not already have that money. If I didn't already have that reward on hand, you know what I'm saying? I would not have done that. So that's the problem, anyone giving up that amount of clothing and stuff like that back in the day, that amount of resources back in the day, that clothing and stuff like that was wealth, like material and stuff like that was a part of one's wealth. You don't just, like it costs a lot of money just to get some dang linen sheets nowadays, you know what I'm saying? So like 30 fine linen robes, like a man's robe or a woman's robe or whatever back during them days was like very essential. Like it was like life or death. Like that was a life or death item right there, because that kept you warm in the cold. You sat on that, when you wanted to sit down somewhere. You used your robe for quite a lot. So like 30 fine linen robes, and then 30 sets of festival clothing. Like, first of all, I don't even know what all is even included in that set. But I'm imagining some shirt, pants, maybe a robe or something like that, jacket, something like that. I don't even know if it come with jewelry or headpieces or whatever. Like, I don't know. Belts, shoes, I don't know. But like, it was just a hefty reward. And I feel like it should not have been the reward, if people didn't have them resources on hand, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, Samson ends up losing the bet because his wife tells those men and everything, the men of the town, the answer to Samson's question. Now Samson's reply is what really got. It's like he didn't have to say it like that, but I mean, he said, Samson said, if you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved my riddle. Basically, he was like, if you hadn't been messing around with my wife, if you hadn't, went to my wife in order to get the answer, then you never would have solved the riddle, is basically what he's saying. He ain't have to say it like that, but but the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. The Lord got him out of a messed up situation. The Lord came to his rescue, gave him the power to do what he needed to do in order for him to be able to, get the reward and pay his debts. Because the Lord does not like us being in debt. He loves for us to pay what we owe. So, the Lord helped Samson out. And I think this is also a way for the Lord to get rid of some enemies, some enemies of Israel, whatever. Like the Lord always has a plan for everything. So there's a reason why this had to go down. You know what I'm saying? Of course, Samson was furious about what happened and everything, and he went back home to live with his father and mother because he wasn't finna put up with his wife after that. Like his wife betrayed him. But hey, so his wife basically in this instance was deserted by her husband, was deserted by Samson. And I'm not sure I'm not sure. What was I gonna say? Hold on. Okay, so like the wife was given. Okay, so the wife ends up being given in marriage to the man who was Samson's best man at the wedding. So like when a wife is deserted by her husband, I guess when I'm guessing that Samson and his wife was not able to consummate the marriage yet. So they didn't engage in the sexual acts, sexual intercourse in order to, seal the marriage, make it official. They just did the wedding ceremony. So him abandoning her like that, I guess she was able to go ahead and marry someone else. I'm not sure if that's a common thing that was done back in the day. I don't know. But all I know is that that's what happened. I know that weddings back in the day probably lasted like several days or whatever, because people had to travel and come and, attend the festivities and all of that. So celebrations lasted for a while. I'm so glad that we don't do that in today's time, because I cannot. Like, I want my wedding to be simple. I want to get married in the church. Small amount of people. I'm not trying to do all that. We gonna have the reception at the church, some food and stuff like that at the church, like, and that's it. Like the party ain't finna last several days. It's just finna be that day. It's just finna be that day. It ain't finna be several days. I can't do that. I can't feed y'all, accommodate y'all, do all that. What's gonna go on for 7 days? Several days is the honeymoon. That's what's gonna go on. We get a whole week or two, because I might want to turn it into a vacation. Well, it's gonna be a vacation already, since it's gonna be a week long. But like, still, like, that's what's gonna last several days. The honeymoon. I'm sorry, the wedding celebration, that's not gonna last for several days. I can't do that. Can't do it. Sure, me and my husband will have a private party for, several days, aka the honeymoon. But we not doing no several day wedding celebration for the family and all of the friends and all of the people who invited. We not doing that. We ain't got money like that. And even if we did, I don't know if I feel like doing all that. I don't know. So this will be a conversation for, me and the future husband, but yeah, not doing all that. I don't want to, but I'll compromise, for him if that's something that he want to do, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. I'm reading the footnotes. So I'm gonna read this footnote for the part about the deserted bride and stuff like that. I'm gonna read this footnote what my Bible says. It says, it appears to be a case of this is for chapter 4. This is chapter 14, and this is for verse 20. Okay, so this is what the footnote is addressing. It's addressing verse 20. I'm going to go ahead and read it real quick. It says, so his wife was given in marriage to the man who had been Samson's best man at the wedding. So, the footnote says, this appears to be a case of a deserted bride. Other than virgin daughters still living in their parental home, single women such as widows and divorcees were vulnerable because they had no male guardian. A deserted bride occupied that no man's land between her father's house and her husband's home. Once the couple had sex, any prospects of a second marriage were dim. The father in this case acted in his daughter's best interest to protect her. He must have been relieved that one of the wedding party would marry her. So basically what it sounds like to me is that Samson and this woman did not have sex. But, you know, they went through the whole wedding ceremony and stuff, so they didn't consummate the marriage like I said. So therefore, one of the men in the wedding party was willing to take her on as a bride, was willing to marry her and everything, since this bride was deserted. So, you know, so yeah. She was saved, I guess, you know, in a way. But yeah, that's all I have to say about this chapter, in all honesty. There's nothing else that I have to say. It was a lot that went down. But yeah. So, thank you guys so much for listening. I love you. Jesus loves you, and have a blessed day. Bye.